The distress beacon had been broadcasting for 11 hours before the Verdant Accord picked it up. Damon was the first to notice it. A junior navigation officer aboard the survey vessel, his four pale eyes narrowing at the signal's origin point, a dense, forested moon in the outer rim of the Keth system. Uninhabited, officially, except something out there was screaming into the void with a frequency reserved for emergency use only. "Captain," Damon said, swiveling his seat, his secondary limbs folding tight against his thorax the way they always did when he was nervous. "The signal is Vrithian in origin. A family unit, perhaps. The signature is small. Juvenile class." Captain Yora clicked her beak once, the Kelthian equivalent of a slow exhale. "Give me confirmation." What they got instead was something none of them expected. The shuttle hit the moon's canopy at 0600 ship time, and Damon was on the ground team purely because he had pushed to be. He told himself it was professional curiosity. The Vrithian species rarely left their home cluster, and a cub stranded this far out was a mystery worth solving. What they found in the clearing was not what he had prepared for. The cub, a young Vrithian, no more than 4 seasons old, all soft gray fur and enormous amber eyes, was lying on a makeshift stretcher of woven branches. Its left leg was wrapped in some kind of silver material, a flat, fibrous tape that caught the dappled moonlight and gleamed like foil. A rigid length of bark had been pressed against either side of the break and secured with the same material. The improvised splint was solid, tighter than anything Damon had seen done without instruments. Crouching over the cub, speaking to it in calm, low tones, was a human. Alara was maybe 30 cycles by human reckoning, compact, dark-haired, wearing a field kit harness strapped across a jacket that had clearly survived worse things than this jungle. She had mud on her chin and blood on her left sleeve, neither of it appearing to be hers, from how she moved, and she was carefully feeding the cub something from a small foil packet. She looked up when the team emerged from the tree line. "No panic, just sharp assessment." "Medical," she said. "Yes," Damon replied, stepping forward, his translator clicking softly at his collar. "We received the beacon. Are you the one who—" He gestured at the cub's leg. "Yeah." She sat back on her heels, letting the team's medic rush forward. "Found the little one about 6 hours ago. The family pod crashed about 3 kilometers north. The adults are—" She pressed her lips together. "They didn't make it. The cub had a compound fracture, tibia, possibly fibula too. I couldn't be certain without imaging. I set it as best I could and immobilized it." Damon stared at the silver tape. "With that?" Alara glanced at the splint, then back at him. "Duct tape. I had 2 rolls and some straight bark. It worked. The cub survived the shuttle ride. That was the first miracle, according to Dr. Savan, the Verdant Accord's chief medical officer, a Kelthian physician with 4 advanced degrees and a reputation for perfectionism that bordered on religion. The second miracle was that the fracture had been set correctly. Savan spent 20 minutes scanning the cub's leg before she said a single word. Then she turned to where Alara was sitting in the corridor outside the medical bay, drinking something hot from a battered flask, and stared at her with the particular stillness of a Kelthian who was deeply, philosophically confused. "You did this," Savan said. "It was not a question." "I did. With adhesive tape and wood." Alara nodded. "The reduction is adequate," Savan said. The word adequate clearly cost her something. "The fragments are aligned with intolerances I would expect from a trained orthopedic specialist working with proper instrumentation. The immobilization prevented further vascular compromise." A pause. "How?" Alara shrugged one shoulder. "Field medicine. You learn what you can do with what you have. But the tape holds about 400 pounds of tensile load per inch. It's basically a structural material." She tilted her head. "I've seen humans fix spacecraft hull breaches with it." A cub's leg seemed more important. Savan turned back toward the medical bay. Damon, who had been leaning in the doorway pretending to review his navigation logs, watched the doctor pause with one hand on the frame. "The methods were brutal," Savan said finally, without turning around. "Unrefined. Imprecise by every standard this facility operates under. But," Alara said, another long pause, "but the cub is breathing, and the leg will heal." Savan stepped inside. "I will note it in my report." Damon found Alara later on the observation deck, watching the moon drift past below them. The jungle canopy was a dark, soft sweep of green and black, and somewhere down there was a wrecked pod and two Vrithian adults who had never made it home. "How did you know how to set a broken bone?" he asked, settling into the seat across from her. His secondary limbs were calm now. He'd noticed that happening around her. Alara looked at her hands for a moment. "I grew up in a remote settlement, 4 days from the nearest hospital. When something went wrong, you figured it out or you lost someone." She was quiet for a beat. "I've set my own fingers before. Twice. A dislocated shoulder once. You get used to the idea that help might not come, so you become the help." Damon thought about that. In Kelthian culture, medicine was a sacred discipline, layered with ceremony, licensing, centuries of formalized tradition. The idea of a non-physician placing their hands on another creature's broken body and fixing it was, in the kindest interpretation, deeply irregular. "Our doctors called your methods brutal," he said. "I know." She didn't seem bothered. "They're right. It wasn't elegant. It probably hurt the cub even through the sedative I managed to synthesize from my kit." Her voice didn't waver, but something in her eyes did. "But elegant wasn't available. Working was available. So I did what worked." Damon looked at her for a long moment. "The Vrithian cub has no family now," he said. "The species has clan networks. We will contact them. But it will take time." "I know. In the meantime, the cub has been asking for you." He tilted his head. "In Vrithian, which your translator cannot fully parse. But the medical team believes the general meaning is the Silverhands person, the one who wrapped the hurt away." Alara looked at him. Then she stood up, set her flask on the seat, and walked toward the medical bay without another word. Damon filed his report that evening. He spent a long time on the section marked notable events, trying to find language that captured what he had seen without making it sound like a fairy story. He was a navigator. He dealt in coordinates, in verified distances, in things that could be measured and confirmed. But some things resisted measurement. He wrote, "A human crew member, operating alone and without resources, stabilized a juvenile Vrithian patient with a compound limb fracture using improvised materials. The patient survived transport and is expected to make a full recovery." When asked to explain her methodology, the human stated, "You figure it out or you lose someone." This appears to be a comprehensive summary of human emergency medicine philosophy. He paused. Then he added a final line. "Recommend that future survey missions carry at least 2 human crew members. In emergencies, they appear to consider creative problem-solving to be a baseline competency rather than an exceptional trait. This may be useful." He submitted the report, leaned back, and looked out at the stars. Down the corridor, barely audible through the ship's hum, he could hear a cub making small sounds, not quite crying, not quite laughing. Something in between, soft and continuous, the way young things sound when they have been frightened nearly to death and are only now beginning to realize they are safe. And a low human voice answering it, steady and unhurried. Humanity, Damon thought. Absolutely terrifying. Absolutely remarkable. He turned back to his console and got back to work.